and societies and writing so much about it, and then to find myself affected directly was, I think, life-changing is probably the best way to describe it, because it's not just necessarily the media consumption, it's actually the devices that we use that are, as I would discover, are designed to essentially get us to use the devices and the apps and the media and the games more and more and more. And that was basically done at all costs, because that's what they're in the business of doing, is sort of selling more devices and then selling more against your attention as you use those apps and services and games. What nobody was really studying was what's the long-term psychological, emotional, and physical effects of this. And that's now just starting to come out, but thanks to folks like Tristan Harris, who were essentially whistleblowing what was happening with what's called persuasive design, I found out the hard way because I couldn't write what would have been my 8th book. It was absolutely distracted. I couldn't focus the way I used to. My depth and my creativity was not what it used to be. So I couldn't even get past the proposal stage. And I chalked it up to writer's block at first, but ultimately realized that there were patterns in every aspect of my life. So my research, the editing around my research, my ability to focus in putting together presentations. I started to see how I am in terms of presence and mindfulness in front of my family and friends. I started to examine my relationships and my friendships, and it was just across the board. I was not the same person. I was rewired to be faster, to multitask, to keep up with everything. And at some point in my life, just the effect of writing a book was one of the symptoms. It was a much deeper issue, and that's when I dedicated my research. I took a break from all of the other stuff about the future to understand what was happening to me, what was behind it, what were the effects of it, and then what to do about it.
And that's what you brought to this book. Do you want to share some of the things that you learned that people could take away?
Yeah, I'll give it my best.
I mean, I want them to read your book also, but
yes, please.
But yeah, if you go ahead, I'll just let you.
Yeah, the book was. I'll be honest, I did not see myself writing it.
Okay.
I mean, it's really different for me, and it's not how I built my career. It's not what I'm known for, I guess, to say it kindly or honestly. But when I had found out what was happening, I'm not alone in it, right?
Right, absolutely.
So I started to look for answers. I still had to write my next book, but the answers were few and far between, and actually not. I don't even know that they were real solutions. They're definitely treatments, but not solving the problem.
And these are, when you say solutions, we're talking about solutions to the effects of this pervasive marketing and how it's affected us, or solutions for how to interact with technology?
Well, yeah, how to take control over technology, right? So because technology is certainly taking control of us,
yes,
right? And how it's changing our behaviors, it's changing a lot of things, and not for the better. Let's just say that, because it wasn't designed to. It was designed to get us to use the stuff more and to share more, to interact more and to connect more, and that has its effects and its consequences. And so, one of the things that I was looking into were things like practicing mindfulness or meditation, or using productivity apps, or things like Calm, or essentially helping you manage your presence more and your focus more. But those were just treating the symptoms, because it wasn't getting to the core of why I was doing these things or why we do these things. And so I'll really quickly, I found two different circumstances. There's people like me who were programmed through digital, right? But I still had an analog first brain. And then there's people who are true digital natives. They don't know the world any other way. To them, multitasking and distractions and living online is normal.
So we're talking about two generational differences, and I think I could fall into that too, because I'm about the same age as Mark Zuckerberg. So I was in college when Facebook came out, and then you're talking about maybe like your children?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go into that.
Yeah, so the solutions are the same.
Okay.
But getting there is different, right?
Okay.
So for people like me who realize what life was like before, had that sort of shining star or aspirational star to work toward. On the other side of it is more like an intervention.
Okay.
because they don't know any different, and what are the possibilities without it, or taking control of it, I should say.
Okay.
Because what ends up happening is that, and I should probably say, I'm not saying stop using tech.
Right.
I need it in my life, but I'm much more mindful now and intentional about how I use it, because now I know what was happening. But the same things that go into that design and how they make them so addictive, and why we rely on them so much and why we can't put them down, is not unlike any substance abuse.
Okay.
Right? Because those design techniques trigger 6 different chemicals in your body. You know,
Yeah.
it's almost like every time you pick up your phone, you're microdosing. You feel certain things. You feel better in the moment. You feel like the semblance of happiness. But also, it has destructive effects in that it's actually taking away true happiness, that it's actually affecting your self-esteem and self-confidence. It's actually, over the long term, depending on how much you use it, triggering things like depression, and it really starts to affect health and wellness in ways that are just now starting to come out.
And if we could just like break that down a little bit, we're talking about certain content exposure, which has a psychological effect, right? Like via Instagram and things like that. But we're also talking about dopamine secretion and other neurotransmitters as you interact with the device, which are built into the way the app works, right? So
Absolutely.
so it's like an information overload of these idyllic images that are very hard to measure up to, which we saw even growing up with magazines. People used to talk about fashion magazines and how they
Absolutely.
were bad for young girls' self-esteem.
Yes.
And now we have that sort of on steroids.
Yeah, at the very least, and it's not good, right? And so, in the same tricks that go into that type of content consumption are the same things that go into the design of misinformation and fake news and bots, and so they're all triggered to have these psychological reactions. But I don't think anybody really thought about the long-term effects of it, right? They were all attention at all costs.
And are you allowed to share like a few of the little strategies that we are built into some of our favorite apps? Because I've heard you speak about them before.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I will say that if you want to learn more about the persuasive design techniques, which, by the way, is a course taught at Stanford University. So this is that's how a lot of these apps learned how to do this.
Okay.
Tristan Harris is probably the best source of the crazy amounts of design techniques that go into this. But one is intermittent variable rewards. So if you've ever opened Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, there's a millisecond delay before you see how many notifications you have in the app, because it's meant to build up that sense of anxiety so that there's relief delivered when it does show that you have updates and I win, and it's the same
And then
time.
you get dopamine,
Yeah,
and you feel
get
good.
dopamine, yeah.
And what happens when you don't see any? Then you just keep doing it.
You keep doing it. In fact, it's the same type of design strategy that goes into slot machines, for example.
Right, and that's something that we've heard before. I mean, that they've been talking about for a while. But okay, so to bring it back to life skill, I know that you did some very interesting things with the design. Do you want to speak about that? And I don't know if we can see, but there's a really interesting layout for the way. But you can talk about it, and they can look at it on their own.
Sure. Well, so the same persuasive design that goes into, say, the negative aspects of this, there's also positive aspects of the design. So this is my third book sort of experimenting with this.
Okay.
Where I studied how we use mobile devices, how we use apps, what makes us want to use apps more before I knew it was bad for you. But in this case, I looked at, well, how can I engage a brain that's distracted?
Okay.
How can I get people to retain what it is that they're reading without having to reread it a bunch of times because they weren't really in the moment as they were reading it the first time? How to get them to keep turning the page, to keep reading, how to incentivize them or inspire them to actually go through some of the exercises that are in the book that aren't really easy, but that you feel compelled to just do not want to put it down. So that a lot of that was reverse engineered to essentially create what I call an analog app, so that the book itself became immersive and engaging, and that it actually improved, well, I hope, learning.
Wow, and I exactly learning, I could see this being applied to a lot of teaching methods, because that's a huge problem now in schools, right? And a lot of people are talking about changing the model of how we learn at university. And
Oh yeah.
but
I'll tell you, so I first started experimenting with What's the Future of Business. That's 2 books ago, and then the last one, which was X, The Experience When Business Meets Design. I felt like high school students were actually my inspiration.
Okay.
Because their brain, I already knew that mobile devices were rewiring our brain. I just didn't know to the effect of what it was going to do to us in the long term. But I wanted to inspire a new generation of textbook development and learning development so that you were essentially catering to that digital brain in an analog format so that they wouldn't have to unlearn that to relearn how to read in an analog linear format, then to apply it to the way that their brains learn. I'll tell you, really interesting, you can construct content not only in a very beautiful and engaging way, but in a way that actually triggers retention and learning in ways that are actually enjoyable.
Right.
And so, for example, one of the things that I ditched in the last book was the table of contents. You actually don't have to present information in that linear format the way that you used to. In fact, the way that I assembled it, the table of contents now looks more like a home screen, and this table of contents is actually a journey. It looks like chutes and ladders.
Wow.
So you're actually, through the table of contents and how you organize information, you're actually encouraging people to go on their journey.
So what you're saying is that for this new generation that has this analog brain, they don't need a table of contents. They don't read things linearly anymore. Is that? Yeah,
and they read things much more dynamic, and a lot of that is the nature of what I would later discover is just by design of the way we consume information today, right?
Okay.
So I mean, if you've ever found yourself scrolling, endlessly and maybe even mindlessly, that's what you're designing against. So how do you get them to stop, engage, learn and retain, and feel like they want to learn more? And that's what that design strategy was.
Right. Well, that's incredible, and I'm excited to see what else comes from that.
Yeah.
Do you have any predictions for technology in the future and like the direction we're heading?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, these are really interesting times because now, I mean, this was a 2-year journey, and it just now we're starting to see societal effects of this, right? We saw it with the 2016 election. We saw it with how the government really started looking at GDPR in Europe. We saw it how the government's looking at things like Facebook, and there's conversations about regulation, and there's conversations about breaking up big technology monopolies. So this is becoming a really, really, really big deal, but we're still not getting to the heart of the matter, which is we're affecting our health and wellness every time we pick up that device. Parents are unconsciously programming their children to live this life that's not scalable or sustainable, and probably not even happy. And so I believe that the future of technology and also the future of humanity has to be, in number one, becoming much more aware of what's happening, and two, taking it and having a positive influence and an impact on how we use technology in our daily lives, our personal lives, our professional lives, but more so starting to inspire a new generation of technology development that actually helps us be more productive, happier, more creative.
And then are there strategies towards that goal? I mean, how we can inspire. I remember not even that long ago, we were just trying to figure out how to help people use technology. Like that was sort of the goal, right? And now we're like, oh my God, how do we help people use technology the way they should? And then who makes those decisions? I mean, these are hard questions, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, anybody with older parents will tell you that they feel like sometimes that they're an Apple genius or an IT professional trying to support their parents' use of new technology
right,
and answer
absolutely.
questions out of the blue. I think, I hate to say this, but as long as there's money in it, the productive side of technology will flourish. Because right now, all of the money is in advertising and attention, and therefore there's attention hacks and behavior hacks. And I'm trying to encourage through my work, both now as an author of a personal book, but also in my research as an analyst, to help positively influence the next generation of entrepreneurs and startups, and also investors, to show that we can have a positive impact, we can shape this in really productive ways, and create business models around it at the same time.
Wow, well, that's really great. And thank you so much for the work you're doing, not just for your own family, but for the world. This is an important message. I appreciate you coming and writing this book. Where can people find this book if they want to read it?
Well, it's in bookstores everywhere.
Okay.
Maybe support a local bookshop. It's also on Amazon.
Okay.
The URL for it is lifescaling.me. And then if you want to find out more about my stuff, it's briansolis.com and at briansolis on all the social networks.
Excellent. Well, we'll get that at the bottom. Thank you so much. And this has been another episode of Mind, Body, Spirit. I'm Dr. Kate. This is Brian. And if you'd like to binge watch the rest of these episodes, you can do that at drkatetv.com or on Apple TV under the EverTalk TV app or on Roku. Thanks so much. Have a good day.